In this lesson, we're going to learn about one of Excel's most common and complex functions, VLOOKUP. If you've been using Excel for a while, you've almost undoubtedly heard of VLOOKUP. It's a common tool used in a huge number of spreadsheets around the world, and learning it is an important stepping stone to automating a lot of your day-to-day work in Excel. Let's start with an example of what the function can do. In short, VLOOKUP, which stands for vertical lookup, allows us to look up a given value from a vertically oriented table of data. We've created an example workbook here so that you can see it in action. Our sheet lists 2016 Snack World sales numbers for many different product categories. We've created a VLOOKUP function that pulls the proper sales number if we enter the name of a given product category in this product box up top. Check it out. When I enter cakes into the box, our VLOOKUP function updates the sales total to 1,646,500, the sales total for the cakes category. When I change the product category in our input box to brownies, our sales total changes accordingly. Alright, so now that we know what VLOOKUP is, how do we use it? Getting a handle on this function is a bit complicated, but we'll walk through it step by step to make it easy. VLOOKUP takes 4 arguments: a value to look up, an array of cells in which to look up that value, a column index number, which tells Excel how many columns into the array to look for a result, and a range lookup argument, which tells Excel whether to look for an exact match to the specified lookup term or the closest match found in the lookup table. Let's try it out using our sales data table from earlier. Recall that when using VLOOKUP, the table of data we use must be vertically oriented, meaning that column headers appear along the top and the value we want to look up appears along the side. We've also got to make sure that the value we want to look up, in this case the name of a product, appears in the first column of the table in question. Let's get started. First, we'll feed VLOOKUP a value to look up. In this case, let's use the string brownies. Then, we'll give it an array in which to look up our string. It's important that when specifying the array here, we use our entire table rather than just the column in which our lookup value appears. In this case, our entire table spans from cells B2 through D17. Next, we'll give VLOOKUP a column index number. This number tells the function how many columns into our data to look for a result. To use VLOOKUP, we literally have to count the number of columns of data we have. In this case, we want to pull the number from the sales column, which is 1, 2 columns into our data set. So we'll provide VLOOKUP with a column index number of 2. Finally, we need to provide VLOOKUP with a range lookup argument. This argument either has to be the word true or the word false. If the range lookup is true, VLOOKUP will assume that your input array is sorted alphabetically and will find the closest match to your specified lookup term. If range lookup is false, VLOOKUP won't assume anything about the sorting of your input array, and it'll only find an exact match with the term you specify. When we use VLOOKUPs, we almost always set the range lookup to false. That way we don't have to worry about sorting our input table, and we know our VLOOKUP will only succeed if there is an exact match with our input term. After pressing enter, our formula is complete. Note that VLOOKUP is pulling the correct value from the sales column for the brownies category. Let's make some changes in the formula to get an even better handle on how VLOOKUP works. First, we'll change the lookup string to another product category, like cakes. Note that when we change the string and press enter, our VLOOKUP formula updates its output to reflect the sales numbers for the cakes category. Second, we'll try pulling lookup data from a different column. Let's say that we wanted to pull data from our units sold column rather than our sales column. To do so, we just have to update our column index number to 3, since the units sold column is 1, 2, 3 columns into our input array. After making the update, our VLOOKUP automatically changes to reflect the proper number pulled from the units sold column. Finally, we'll wire our VLOOKUP function up to a dynamic input cell using cell references rather than manually coding our product name into the formula. Let's enter a product name in cell G2, then replace the product name in our VLOOKUP formula with a reference to cell G2. The output of our VLOOKUP formula automatically updates. And like magic, our VLOOKUP will pull new data if we change the product name in cell G2. Note that we do need to provide VLOOKUP with a valid product name. An invalid product name will result in a formula error. Now that our VLOOKUP is complete, I've got to warn you about one important caveat to this otherwise very useful function. Recall that in constructing our VLOOKUP, we had to manually count how many columns into our data table for the function to go to pull results. That's fine and well, but it becomes a problem if we insert a new column into our data set. Check it out. When I put a new column of data in, our VLOOKUP no longer returns the proper results. That's because it's looking 3 columns into our data set for an answer, and the target column, units sold, is no longer 3 columns into our data set. After inserting this column, we'll have to update our VLOOKUP function with a new column index number to fix it. Moral of the story: when using VLOOKUPs, always be careful when inserting columns into your dataset, as it may have unforeseen consequences. That's why we almost always recommend that Excel users replace their VLOOKUPs with a formula called index match, which contains much of the same functionality without this important drawback. We'll explore index match in a later video in this module. That's it. You now know how to put together a VLOOKUP function in Excel. Take a look at the exercises bundled with this video to get more practice with this versatile function.